Welcome back to Flying Upstream, the show where we explore what happens when people choose to live life on their own terms, especially when the current seems to be pulling them in the opposite direction. Today's guest is someone who has traveled a deeply personal and transformative path from the fast paced world of corporate television to the quiet power of healing through art and story. Jodi Crawford started out in broadcast and print journalism and spent years working in TV. But when life threw her some heavy curveballs, including the death of her mother, the loss of other family members, and the unraveling of her marriage, she began asking herself some big questions. Why now? Where am I going? That journey took her back to school to study creative writing and psychology. Now Jodi is a practicing art therapist, blending writing, visual art, and genealogy to help others process their pain, explore their roots, and uncover the wisdom within their own family stories. Whether you're struggling with grief, navigating mental health challenges, or just feeling lost in your own life, Jodi's story is a reminder that healing often starts with asking better questions and being brave enough to tell the truth. Jodi, welcome to Flying Upstream.
Hi, Kristen. How are you?
Amazing. I'm good, thanks. We're so
Good.
excited. So let's start with the big pivot. What was it like to go from the corporate world of television to becoming an art therapist? And was there a moment when everything shifted for you?
Sure. I just want to make a quick correction first. I am a registered psychotherapist. I'm in the process of completing my thesis for art therapist. So I just don't want to misrepresent myself. Um, so sorry, what was the moment like when I was changing from TV to becoming a therapist?
Right. What was it like to go from the corporate world of television to becoming a therapist?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of change because as much as I love the people I worked with and I love some of the stuff that I did in television, you're working for the almighty dollar. That's, it's that capitalist society pulling you every which way. Um, and, there are different ideas of integrity regarding different things. And there's also a real work, work, work kind of attitude. Like you stay till whatever hour you know, are almost competing to show how long you can work. Like I worked a 20-hour day the other day, that sort of thing. Um, and getting that life work balance, I think became very important when I had children. I mean,
Mhm.
you realize it's not all for you, but you also have to make sure that you are fulfilled in your way. It's the old adage of being on the plane and putting on your oxygen mask first so that you can be helpful for your children or whoever's around you. So self-care, that aspect is very important. I'll go into that. Um, but yeah, it was a real pivot, obviously. And I was doing a lot of writing in my previous job, and I did go into writing, so there's some similarities. But just letting go of some of those chains of that need to be on the cog, I guess,
Mhm.
and how to do that while still able to support yourself and look after people emotionally, but financially as well. So, it's a challenging thing, and you have to balance it and see what time you have available and what you can allot. And, I know there's some people who are in different socioeconomic places where, maybe they can just allot 5 minutes towards getting something that's more fulfilling to them. I don't know if that at all answers your question. Sort of sort of
Absolutely.
circular, but yeah.
Yeah, and kind of, moving forward on that thread, you experienced so much loss in a short period of time with your mother, family members, your separation. How did writing and art help you make sense of it all?
Well, I mean, they really helped. Um, the things I find about writing, to me, there's 3 important things about writing. One is to express oneself, one is to gain insight, and one is just to kind of expel, like, those thoughts, those stresses, everything like that, like, you write them down on the paper, and it's not like they go away forever, but sometimes just getting it out into something, um, makes it leave you for the time being. And it also the insight is created, I think, sometimes when you can go back and you can read I journal, so I can go back and read something that I wrote down 2 weeks before that was so heavy, so pressing, and realize, as I'm looking back on it, it maybe wasn't that much of a major thing, or it was something that was really challenging and, hey, I was able to get over this and get past this and get beyond it. So those 3 things, expressing the insight and the expulsion of those emotions, I think that's almost, art therapy in a nutshell. But for me, writing is a large part of that. Just creating, getting those stresses out and onto paper, expressing myself so I could look back on it and see, "Oh, that's what I was feeling." Because there are times when you are going through all these emotions and all these feelings, all these challenges, you don't even know, what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, because you don't have that ability to kinda step back and look at it. But when you put something down on paper, you have that distance. You can step back, you can look at your painting, you can look at your writing, you can look at your sculpture, whatever it is that you create, which I think is why creating is so important for everyone. It doesn't matter, what your job is or what your life is like. It's imperative, I believe, for everyone.
Yes, I agree. And, I appreciate one of the things that you're touching on here, which is separating being in the moment where you're writing about it, you're reliving moments in your mind, you're emotional because you're getting it all out onto paper. And then after some time has passed, being able to step back and look at the full picture. So, as you said, realizing that something I was upset about a month ago, now that some time has passed and things have played out, was not a big deal at all. And being able to do that level of reflection is what helps us learn and change our behavior or our thought patterns for the next time. So maybe next time it
Mhm.
happens, it's not such a big deal. But without that ability to write and then have the reflection later, right? See the sculpture for what the whole thing is as an example, right? Not just the elbow or the foot, the whole thing. Now you're able to process it in a completely different way that I just don't think people really can when you're venting to a coworker, for example, or
Yeah.
just going to the gym, right? But those are also great things to do, but have a very different purpose, I think.
And I think too, if you're always reacting and never reflecting, then you're always in a really heightened state. How can you find a resolution? Um, how can you, you know, relax a bit? I'm coming up with a lot of R words, but they're all, all very relevant.
Yeah.
But yeah, the
Right.
constant reaction without the reflection, um, I think is very harmful
Yeah.
because I mean, I'm not gonna delve into it too deeply, but the state of the world is pretty challenging right now, and you see a lot of people just reacting, 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 and it makes for a very tense, fraught state for communities even, for cities, for countries, um, and someone spoke to me once and they said, "What about people who are in dire socioeconomic straits? Like, they are just worried about, like, where to get money to get food for their children or something for the and I think it's really important to think about because, we can come from a relatively maybe privileged position and think like, "Oh, just go and make some art." And it sounds so flighty, but truly, you do have to take that time. So, the 1 minute when your kids are asleep or whatever, take 1 minute, write down 5 words, and maybe just reflect upon them, like, "Why did these words come up?" Things like that, and that can be just your creation for the night. That can be your journaling. I think a lot of times journaling is daunting too because people think, "Well, what do I write about? I don't have time every night." and I think letting go of some of those parameters of like, I must do it every night or I must do like 3 paragraphs or something. I think letting go is really important about creating.
Yes. Yes, I agree with that. It's hard to let go because we do have expectations put on ourselves by ourselves as well as other people around us, our families, parents, children, partners, coworkers, and it's
Yeah.
hard to put that aside when we feel under so much pressure all the time. But I agree it is a really critical piece of this experience in order for it to have a good effect. But I also appreciate what you're saying about just writing like 5 words. Like anyone can do that, right?
Yeah.
Happy, angry, sad,
Yeah.
blue shoes, you know, like it can be
Exactly,
anything.
exactly. Well, and I think people also they come into art therapy and they have this expectation or believe that there's an expectation upon them, like, "Well, I'm not an artist. I can't do art. I don't do this wouldn't work for me. I don't I can't work with art." And honestly, like, you can draw stick people, or you can just make a mark. Like, all that is very effective when you're working with art in therapy and just in life.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, just letting go of those perceptions of what is acceptable, what is good. Um, I was gonna say, you mentioned previously when we spoke about lessons maybe learned, and I think that's a huge one for me. It's just like the ability to let go. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't even have to be good. You know? It just has to be something that you're creating.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I want to pivot for a minute because you've talked about being pulled toward your roots. So
Mhm.
exploring family stories, even going back as far as the year 1000. I'm curious to know what sparked that genealogical journey for you.
Well, I think, you know, it may be a certain age or a certain stage in life when you have kids, you start to wonder and not you don't have to have kids, like, people don't have to have children to be interested in their genealogical background. Um, that can be a reason, but I think also challenging relationships with relatives can be a big catalyst, which for me, I think part of it was too, like, people are aging, and you're thinking, like, how am I dealing with this relationship? I mean, it's all relational, right? Because even if your ancestors are 1,000 years ago, there's still a relationship with you and with the way that you're living too. Um, so just sort of understanding that and understanding connections or wanting to understand connections, I guess, and wanting to see things from other people's perspectives, wanting to understand why things are a certain way, maybe in my family. Then I started to delve into like, I went on to ancestry.ca is my big connection to that. I don't even remember what the specific catalyst was for me to get interested in it, but I do know it was, like, aging family, some challenging family relationships, and, my grandmother, who lived to be 101, one of the catalysts was, "Oh, I'm gonna do up a tree for her, a bit of a tree for maybe her 100th birthday." I can't remember which birthday exactly. It was getting up there. And so that really, um, led me to exploring further and further and further. And then it led me to research about the effect of family stories on people in general. And I found some really, really interesting things in the research, um, that they had a really strong effect on, like, telling family stories and knowing family stories. I mean, it provides a rootedness, it gives you a connection if you're someone who has maybe no connection to your family of origin, and maybe for good reason, maybe it's not safe to have a connection to your family of origin, but you're still interested in knowing what went before or maybe why it's not safe to have a family connection. But it can also provide coping skills, and there can be like a communal dialogue as well, or a communal story. It's just so interesting, and I did study with family stories and their effects on coping for cancer patients, and I'm continuing in that research right now. And it's amazing how people can really connect to it, even if they don't have an actual, literal, like real life family connection. It
Yeah,
really
I
places them.
I can see how it'd be really powerful. It's sort of finding your connection back to, your roots, where you came from. They call it roots for a reason, right? It's
Exactly.
the foundation. So
Mhm.
now you guide others in workshops that involve writing from the perspective of a family member. Why is that kind of empathetic storytelling so powerful, especially if someone had a challenging relationship?
Well, it is really powerful. Yeah, I've done workshops that weren't related to therapy and workshops that are related to therapy. But in both of them, I mean, a lot comes out. People react very, very strongly. I think when to me, I could bang on and on about perspective taking that because I think it's so important. I mean, what I was saying about challenging times in the world, perspective taking is so important. If you're only seeing things tunnel vision from your perspective, then that's great for you if you live in a bubble, but we don't live in a bubble. And I think relating to family stories, you can so I'll just in a really quick little nutshell, these creative genealogy workshops that I do, people come in, they bring a story about a family member that they're not in the story, the person who brings the story in. It can be a close family member, it can be a distant one, it can be an ancestor. And then we bring in all sorts of context like weather, environment, you know, social, like everything like that that we can think of, historical context. And we plug it in to a story, and then people write the story of their ancestor or their relative with all these contexts, and they write it from the perspective of the person. So a lot of times, say you bring in a story about your dad and you have a challenging relationship with your dad. Don't know why I brought that one in. Um, and you can write something from maybe when he's a child or something, like, a story that he mentioned to you, and it can just be something mentioned in passing. It doesn't have to be like, I have this whole page of a story. Um, and you try and put yourself in their shoes, experiencing what they're experiencing. If you're really able to do that and you're writing it in first person, a lot of times people have said to me, and I have felt this as well, that they really felt so much more of an understanding of actually walking in their shoes, of being them at that time, which also in turn helps them understand more a bit, like you can see your parent as a child and kind of feeling them as a child, understanding that they were a child kind of takes that whole power dynamic away a bit, which can, relax the challenges of relationships. Um, it can also help you to understand, like, oh, these were the things that were affecting this person. Now I kind of understand why they come at things from a certain way. Oh, this person, you know, went through wartime and they were probably always on high alert. So now I know why they're reacting with like a stress reaction all the time in their relationships, for example. Or, this person had some trauma in their life. Or it can be too like, oh, this person had a wonderful relationship with their one parent. Now I understand why I'm closer to this one parent because they understand how to, parent lovingly, etc. Just examples. Yeah.
It's beautiful. Yeah, and I know that you also have um, mental health has been a thread in your life. And as you're talking about telling or writing stories from other people's perspective, how does that history inform the way that you hold space for others, either you personally or people in your workshops?
Well, I mean, I think that, the fact that I have, family members who have mental health issues who, I've had to deal with that. I mean, first of all, I think it helps as a therapist because I think if you meet any therapist, I could be wrong, but I think if you meet any therapist, you'll find that they have some form of trauma or challenge in their background that has perhaps led them to this career. But also, yes, in these workshops as well, I think people with lived experience who are connecting with people who want to connect in that same way, there's all it's already like a short form connection. So we've already formed a relationship just by the fact that we sort of understand these relational challenges. So, and I think people also feel more comfortable opening up about things and talking about certain things when they know that the people that they're talking to may have experienced similar things or at least have an understanding of it experientially.
That makes sense. That makes
Mhm.
sense. Yeah. Well, Jody, you've given us so much to think about, and we've got one last question for you before we wrap up. If you could give every person struggling with loss, identity, or mental health one creative prompt to begin their healing, what would it be?
So it's tough because I just want to really quickly say, and I'm not going to go on and on about AI, but I found that some people lately have been telling me, like, oh, I've got a therapist and it's AI. And there's no safety structure in that. So the thing about giving a creative prompt is I want to make sure I give something that is basic enough that people aren't going to go to a space where they're left bereft, which I think is a danger with, talking to AI or something. But this prompt that I use, I love because it can create such insight um, using certain parameters. I know we talked before about maybe throwing away some parameters, but parameters can be great in some respects. Um, and since we are talking about writing as well, I use a prompt that I call a timed poem. So we can take a theme and it can be as challenging or as straightforward as we want it to be. And I think if you're doing it on your own, don't go into trauma, or if you've got a relationship with your parent, don't choose one of your parents or anything like that, because I think you want to do that with a guide, with a therapist beside you who can help guide you through that and hold you in a safe space for that. But if you're looking at changing your job or something, I think this is a great prompt for that. So, I mean, it's almost, I guess we could say it's almost like a vision board, a written vision board. Um, so a timed poem, give yourself, I would say, a minute at the most. Figure out what your theme is, and if it's like new career, put your timer on, write down as many words as you can think of about new career, just anything. Even if it doesn't make sense to you at the time, just write it down. If it pops in your head about new career, write it down. When that timer goes off, you may have a list of things, you may have 4 things, 4 words. Um, choose 3 or 4 of the words that jump out to you, and words will jump out to you. You'll see, they'll just speak to you. And then write 1 line incorporating each word in it. So if you have 3 words, you're writing 3 lines, one with 1 word, one with what, and you will tell yourself what you actually are feeling. It is so shocking what comes out of these little poems. It's I mean, try it. Trust
That's
me. I love
amazing.
it. I use the prompt multiple times. It's really effective.
That's amazing. And what an inspiring way to wrap up today with a challenge for our listeners to try this inspiring poem
Mhm.
strategy. So, Thank you so much, Jodi, for being with us today. And for our free spirits out there, Jodi Crawford reminds us that our healing doesn't come from avoiding the past, it comes from bravely engaging with it. Whether you're writing about your grandmother's diary, drawing a memory, or imagining your ancestor's voice, there's power in reclaiming your story and choosing how you carry it forward. To learn more about Jodi's work and her upcoming arts and writing workshops, or her research into storytelling and healing, be sure to follow her online. We'll drop the links in the show notes. And remember, wherever you are in your story, it's still being written. So keep questioning, keep creating, and